A man sits alone in his prison cell, staring at a worn Quran, counting the final hours of his life. Freddy Eugene Owens was just 19 when a single shot changed everything, a crime that would follow him for decades. Now, at 49, he is set to become the first person executed in South Carolina in more than 13 years. But his story is far from simple. A childhood of trauma, an abusive stepfather, and a lifetime of hardship all collided with one fateful night in 1997. And even as the state prepares to end his life, last-minute claims of innocence and betrayal surface, forcing the question, did Freddy Owens truly pull the trigger, or has justice condemned the wrong man? March 18, 1978, South Carolina. Freddy Eugene Owens came into the world with the odds already stacked against him. His mother was only 18, still a child herself, raising one. By the age of 5, Freddy was placed in foster care. He knew neglect, mistreatment, and homes that never wanted him. When he eventually returned to his mother, safety still wasn't waiting. She had remarried, and his stepfather became another source of pain. Freddy watched everything. He saw his mother beaten. At just 7 years old, he saw his grandmother pull a trigger and shoot someone. Trauma didn't just touch him, it buried itself in his bones. Doctors would later diagnose him with antisocial personality disorder, but long before that label, his childhood had already been cracked wide open. The scars never healed. They only grew. And one night they boiled over. It started as a plan. Greenville, South Carolina. November 1, 1997. Sloppy and cruel. Freddy Owens and 3 friends, Lester Young, Nikio Vance, and Stephen Andre Golden, were just teenagers chasing quick money. Armed and desperate, they split into pairs. Owens and Golden walked into a convenience store. Behind the counter was 41-year-old Irene Granger Graves, a clerk, a mother of 3, simply working her shift. Golden would later testify. Owens pointed the gun, demanded she open the safe. But Irene couldn't. Seconds dragged on. Then a gunshot. 1 bullet to the head. Irene collapsed. When they tore through the store, all they found was $37.29. That was it. $37. And for it, a life was gone. When Owens regrouped with the others, he told them flatly, a woman had been shot. But the law moved fast. By November 11, 1997, Freddy Eugene Owens was in handcuffs. Barely 19 years old, and his life was already over. Broad River Correctional Institution. September 20, 2024. Now 49, Owens sat hunched over a worn Quran in his cell. Its pages frayed at the edges, softened by years of reading and holding on. It was the only anchor he had left, his faith, his prayers, the rhythm of verses that carried him through the silence of death row. But faith couldn't change what the courts had written. To the state of South Carolina, Freddy Eugene Owens wasn't a man seeking redemption. He was a man who had crossed the line too many times. Because this story wasn't just about Irene Granger Graves anymore. Locked away, already condemned to die, Owens had taken another life, this time behind bars, another violent act, and in the eyes of the court, the final nail in his coffin. Freddy Eugene Owens was branded unredeemable, beyond saving. It no longer mattered that he was only 19 in 1997, or that his childhood had been broken before it ever began. The jury wasn't listening. He remembered the trials, the testimonies, the unraveling. Owens and Stephen Golden were the only 2 charged with murder that night. But their paths split quickly. Golden took a deal. In exchange for testifying against Owens, prosecutors dropped the capital charge. Golden walked away with voluntary manslaughter and 28 years. Owens was left standing alone. February 8, 1999. Greenville County Trial Court. Owens faced the jury with charges stacked high: murder, armed robbery, conspiracy, and illegal possession of a firearm. He denied it all, insisting he hadn't pulled the trigger. But Golden's testimony was damning. And worse, there was a video. The grainy surveillance showed 2 masked figures entering the store. One in a ski mask, one in a stocking cap. Prosecutors said Owens was the one in the ski mask. The one who raised the gun. The one who fired the shot that killed Irene Granger Graves. February 15, 1999. The jury deliberated. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. But the real collapse came less than 12 hours later inside a crowded Greenville County jail cell, surrounded by 10 other inmates. Owens snapped. His target was Christopher Brian Lee, 28 years old, serving just 90 days for a traffic violation. He wasn't supposed to be there long, but that night, he would never walk out. According to Owens's own confession, Lee taunted him, told him his cousin had been on the jury, told him he was going to fry. It was the wrong provocation at the wrong time. Owens attacked. A blow to the face. Then a pen, driven into Lee's eye, then his throat. A bed sheet twisted around his neck. His skull smashed against concrete. A lighter pressed to his eyes and hair. Finally, Owens forced shut one nostril and rammed the same pen into the other until Lee suffocated. By morning, Lee was dead. A traffic offender, gone before his sentence was halfway through. February 17, 1999. Owens returned to court for his sentencing hearing. He confessed everything in chilling detail, step by step, without remorse. Whatever sympathy might have existed for him evaporated. His lawyers begged the jury to see the broken child behind the violence. The prosecution fired back. Irene Graves had left 3 children behind, now orphaned. Owens's rage, they argued, made him a permanent danger to everyone around him. That same day, the jury decided. Freddy Eugene Owens would face the gurney. For the armed robbery, conspiracy, and gun charges, he received another 40 years combined, but those sentences were symbolic. He wasn't coming back. And still it wasn't over. Not yet. Because just as one verdict was handed down, another case opened. Owens, alongside 19-year-old Fred Walker Jr., believed to be his accomplice in the killing of Christopher Lee inside the jail, was now staring at a second murder charge. One life had already been taken, now another. The cycle was complete. There would be no more trials to win, only time to wait. They say death row is where time stands still. But for Freddy Eugene Owens, it was where the fight began. September 4, 2001. Just 3 years into his sentence, Owens's lawyers filed their first major appeal. The case reached the South Carolina Supreme Court, and for a flicker of a moment, something shifted. The court upheld his convictions for the robbery and for taking Irene Graves' life, but it vacated his death sentence. Procedural errors. For now, he would be resentenced. A crack in the wall. A faint chance at survival. But the window slammed shut quickly. February 17, 2003. Owens stood before a new jury, same charges, same pain, same outcome. The court didn't flinch. Circuit Judge John Kittredge called Irene Graves' murder the worst of the worst, and Owens's behavior inside and outside prison proof of a man with no regard for human life. Yet Owens refused to stay down. His defense pressed on, filing motion after motion. And in 2004, they struck again. The Supreme Court ordered yet another resentencing. 2006, another trial, another jury, another chance. But the result never changed. For the third time, Freddy Eugene Owens was sentenced to die. By 2008, the South Carolina Supreme Court made it final. They upheld his sentence, citing not just his crimes, but a pattern of chaos behind bars, fires in his cell, assaults on guards and inmates, hidden weapons. To the court, this wasn't redemption, it was danger. From then on, the appeals faded and the world moved on. But inside Broad River Correctional Institution, Owens began to change. By 2015, he had converted to Islam, adopting the name Khalil Divine Black Sun Allah. He studied Arabic, wrote poetry, and filled journals with reflections. For the first time, it seemed he was reaching for something other than violence. But the law hadn't been forgotten. His execution date was set, October 3, 2008. Then postponed. Another date, January 9, 2009. Delayed again. The reason wasn't mercy, it was logistics. South Carolina's supply of lethal injection drugs had expired. Pharmaceutical companies refused to sell more. And so, executions across the state ground to a halt. For more than a decade, no one was executed. An unofficial moratorium settled over the chamber. Until June 25, 2021. A new death warrant. A new countdown. But even then, one question remained. How should Freddy Owens die? With no drugs left, lawmakers passed a chilling new law. Inmates must choose the electric chair or the firing squad. A third method, lethal injection, would only return if the drugs became available. Until then, inmates had to choose the chair or the bullet. Neither quick, neither clean. Owens, along with other death row prisoners, fought back. They filed lawsuits, arguing that electrocution and firing squads violated the Constitution's 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. Their lawyers warned it meant agony, unnecessary pain, prolonged suffering, psychological torture. The state's response was blunt. This wasn't about comfort. The law, they argued, didn't guarantee a painless death, only a lawful one. July 31, 2024. The South Carolina Supreme Court issued its ruling. Electrocution and firing squad were constitutional. 5 justices in agreement. With that, the door was unlocked. The moratorium was over. Capital punishment in South Carolina was back. And Freddy Eugene Owens would be the first. August 23, 2024. His death warrant was signed. Execution date, September 20, 2024. Owens was given 3 options: the chair, the firing squad, or lethal injection, if the chemicals could be found. He had until September 6 to decide. If he stayed silent, the electric chair would be the default. But Owens refused. For him, the choice was spiritual, not strategic. As a Muslim, he wrote, selecting his own method was equivalent to taking his own life, a sin in Islam. He couldn't carry that burden into eternity. So he left it to someone else. On September 4, 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court approved his request. The decision would fall to his attorney, Emily Pavola. 2 days later, she chose lethal injection. The gurney was prepared. The process set in motion. The countdown ticked on. 2 days earlier, a shocking twist had surfaced. His accomplice, Stephen Golden, signed a sworn statement. Owens wasn't the shooter. He admitted he had lied under oath out of fear. The real killer, he claimed, was still alive, still dangerous. Golden called it a matter of conscience. Owens's lawyers argued it was enough to demand a new trial. But the South Carolina Supreme Court dismissed it as too little, too late. They pointed to Owens's own words, his confessions to police, to his mother, to his girlfriend. To them, his guilt had already been written. By 5 p.m., the legal noise had fallen silent. No more motions, no more petitions, no more last-minute appeals. Only the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the soft footsteps of guards outside his cell. When they entered, they asked what he wanted for his final meal. Owens answered slowly, choosing each word with care. 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, a ribeye steak cooked well done, 6 chicken wings, 2 strawberry sodas, and a slice of apple pie. Large, maybe excessive, but still under the $15 limit and approved. Perhaps he thought food might slow the clock, but it didn't. Time kept moving. He ate quietly, flanked by just 2 people, his spiritual advisor and his attorney, Emily Pavola. His lawyer was already behind the glass, waiting in the witness area. As he stepped into the chamber, his eyes locked on hers. They never broke. On the other side sat the family of Irene Graves, her son-in-law, faces set, waiting for the justice they'd been promised 27 years earlier. Owens was guided to the gurney. He lay back without resistance. Straps fastened across his wrists, ankles, and chest. The microphone was lowered. Asked for final words, he only shook his head. No statement. No apology. No declaration. Just the silence of a man ready for the end. Still staring at Pavola, he didn't look away, not as the 4 slid into his arm, not as the warden gave the nod. At 6:45 p.m., the pentobarbital began to flow. For a moment, nothing changed. Then came the labored breaths, ragged, uneven. Some witnesses called it snoring. Others, gasping. His chest rose and fell, heavy and slow. His eyes stayed fixed on Pavola. One final exhale escaped his lips, almost a whisper, "Bye." Then stillness. No movement. No sound. The doctor entered, gloved and quiet. Fingers on his neck, stethoscope to his chest. After a long moment, she nodded. The warden turned to the room. Time of death, 6:55 p.m. Freddy Eugene Owens, just 49 years old, became the first person executed in South Carolina in over 13 years. Hours later, his mother issued a statement. Her grief poured into words. She called it a grave injustice, insisting her son had not killed Irene Graves. She said the state had failed him, that the truth had never been fully told. But by then, the chamber was empty. The straps were unbuckled, the lights dimmed, the witnesses gone. In the end, Freddy Eugene Owens's case shows how one violent choice can ripple through generations, leaving only loss behind. Justice may have been served, but the questions will never fade. If you want more true crime stories told with depth and detail, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case.